This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. Before we get started today, I just would like to make a couple of announcements. The first one is our fellow board member and, in my case, friend and colleague, Jeff Rosenthal, his term is up and he's no longer sitting on the board. And I just want to personally thank him for all his efforts and all the hard work he put in, and just to tell him he'll be missed. So I officially wanted that on the record. Secondly, I have the honor of introducing Nicole Allen, our new board member. She's in the Albany conference room, and she has been appointed to the board, and we look forward to working with her. So welcome. When we get into the meeting, I'm going to have her say a few words about herself, but I didn't want to start this meeting without recognizing these two people. With that, we'll turn it over to the governance committee. And again, I wanted to thank former committee chair Rosenthal for his efforts on that. And I know he's on the line, and I just wanted to thank him. I will go now. Mr. Candido is going to run the meeting. I turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Today's Governance Committee, Finance Committee, and regular meetings of the Hudson River, Black River Regulating District are occurring virtually, as well as from our Saginaw field office in Mayfield and our Hudson River area office in Albany, with board members and staff joining remotely and members of the public able to do so as well. The board meeting agenda is available at hrbrrd.ny.gov under board meetings. We ask that you please close all of the programs on your computer or your phone, silence your cell phone, and mute your audio when not speaking. The conference organizer will monitor the program's chat function for public comment. Comments may also be mailed to hrao@hrbrrd.ny.gov. We'll begin this meeting this morning with our governance committee meeting. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I call the meeting of the Governance Committee to order. And Mr. Leslie, can I ask you to do the roll call, please?
Absolutely. We're going to do present and then video feed. Committee member Albert Hayes.
Here.
Board member Nicole Allen.
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan.
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie here. Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha.
Here.
Chief Engineer Robert Fultan.
Here.
Compliance Officer Stephanie Rizicki.
Here.
Acting Committee Chair Alfred Candido.
Here.
Committee Member Kenneth DeWitt.
Here.
Board Chair Mark Finkel.
Here.
Board Member Timothy Reagan. And Committee Member Richard Byrd has been excused.
Thank you, Mr.
Candido,
Leslie.
all set.
Thank you. We need a motion to adopt the committee's draft agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you. And a second, please.
I'll second that.
Mr. Hayes.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Thank you. Next, I need a motion to accept the Governance Committee meeting minutes from October 12th, 2021. We have a motion, please.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes,
Thank you. A second?
I'll second that.
Mr.
All in
DeWitt.
favor, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstained? Thank you. We have several resolutions that we have to go through today, and I'd like to call on Mr. Manisha to discuss the first few of those. So this would be the annual review and approval of investment policy. Mr. Manisha, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the investment policy on page 6 of your packet. There are no meaningful changes proposed for the investment policy. The investment audit report conducted as part of the regulating district's annual financial statements audit last summer identified no issues that needed to be addressed. We continue to work with our consultant 3+1 on our liquidity analysis that will almost certainly generate some investment recommendations. Actions on short-term interest rates by the Federal Reserve Board may also give us some new things to think about. Under no circumstances will we take any actions that are in conflict with the investment policy and the safety, liquidity, yield paradigm that all government finance officers follow. Happy to answer any questions you have about the proposed investment policy.
If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to accept.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes,
I need a second.
Mr. DeWitt.
Yes, I was muted. I'm sorry.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Resolution is carried. Mr. Manisha, next would be the annual review and approval of the procurement policy. Please.
Mr. Chair, you can find the procurement policy on page 12 of your packet. The overwhelming majority of the procurement policy remains unchanged from the version the board adopted 1 year ago. The one part we have revised is in section Roman numeral 20, which governs our approval of invoices. Each year, we and other state agencies and authorities complete the internal control certification as prescribed in New York State law and regulations. The exercise last year required a review of internal controls as it relates to receiving goods and services. As part of our review, we observed some gaps in the procurement policy, so we recommend being clearer that the signature of a senior staff manager certifies receipt and deployment of goods and services in addition to the amount the regulating district is being charged. We also recommend adding authorization for the to formally designate another senior staff manager to review and approve invoices. Doing so will increase the likelihood that invoices continue to be processed promptly without sacrificing necessary oversight. And I am happy to answer any questions you have about the procurement policy.
I have none.
I have a
Hey,
question.
Tim, I got one question on that policy. If I understand it right, what you just said, who orders it won't be the person that approves it.
We have segregation of duties throughout the procurement policy and in accordance with guidelines established by the state. So that's correct. Multiple layers of oversight as we go through the process from identifying what to order and purchase through the approval and then ultimately through the approval and payment of the invoice.
Okay, got it.
So I have a question, Mr. Manisha. Would this require both senior staff managers to approve, or it's just having an alternate in case one is not available?
I think given the duties of the executive director, he would look to formally designate another senior staff person who would then fulfill those responsibilities. He'll do that in writing to that person and to me as the regulating district's internal control officer.
So in other words, it just adds a second individual, but doesn't require two people together to approve.
That is correct.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. DeWitt?
And a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Hayes?
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carried, thank you. Next on the agenda is the discussion of annual review and approval of the disposition of property guidelines policy. Mr. Manisha, once again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the disposition policy on page 36 of your packet. There are no meaningful changes proposed for the disposition of property guidelines. In recent years, the regulating district has worked closely with the Office of General Services to dispose of any surplus property and anticipate continuing this practice. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the disposition of property guidelines.
If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
I'll second.
Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Thank you. Resolution is carried. Next on the agenda is discussion of the authority mission statement and performance measurements. Mr. Leslie, if you would please explain.
You will find the authority mission statement and performance measurements annual review on page 40 of your board packet. I think we would start with our executive director reciting the mission statement as we do each year.
Thank you, Counselor. The mission of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District is to construct, maintain, and operate reservoirs in the upper Hudson River and Black River watersheds, including the Sacandaga, Indian, Black, Moose, and Beaver rivers, for the purpose of regulating the flow of streams or rivers when required by public welfare, including public health and safety. Regulating reservoirs operated by the regulating district include Great Sacandaga Lake, Indian Lake, Stillwater Reservoir, Sixth Lake, and Old Forge. Benefits derived through the successful completion of the mission include, but may not be limited to, flood protection to the public corporations, parenthetical counties, and parcels of real estate, parenthetical power plants, downstream of said impoundments. Low flow augmentation to provide sufficient water flow enabling downstream wastewater treatment plants to avoid increased treatment costs associated with waste discharge to lower volume rivers and enabling downstream hydroelectric plants to generate low cost hydroelectric power in the hot summer months when rates are generally highest.
Thank you, Executive Director Callahan. That represents our mission statement, which has essentially not changed in 100 years. We are the poster child for lack of mission creep. That said, our performance goals and the metrics against which those are measured are also on page 40 and 41. And in each case, our performance goals have been accomplished over the last year, including providing flood protection, adhering to the offer of settlement, adhering to the operating plans for each reservoir, providing for public safety, providing public information, pertinent to that mission, maintaining safe facilities, managing our lands, and maintaining sound financial status. Our metrics are compliance with the Hudson River, Sacandaga River offer of settlement, the reservoir rule curves establishing target elevations, the river flow thresholds and limits included in the offer of settlement and those operating plans, the occurrence and extent of flooding, which we have largely avoided, even in the light of some other flooding events on other rivers we do not regulate. Our public feedback has been generally positive. Our safety inspections by FERC and DEC have been successful. We've been in compliance with DEC, APA, and other rules and regs. And our independent audit, as Mr. Minitra would report, is looking pretty good. There are additional questions which the board has to review and answer each year. Whether they understand the mission, we've answered yes. Who has the power to appoint management? The board does. If the board appoints management, do we have a policy you follow when appointing the management pursuant to Article 7 of the Regulating Districts bylaws? The duly appointed staff management, they enumerate the qualifications necessary for appointment, and that was adopted by resolution in 2010. Briefly describe the role of the board and the role of management in the implementation of the mission. The board is the primary maker of policy, and they direct senior staff who exercise all power and authority granted in order to put those policies into place. And then it lays out who has what responsibilities. Each of you will need to acknowledge that you have read and understood all of those responses. We will substitute Mrs. Allen's name for Mr. Rosenthal. The first vice chairman position will go empty until the next board's organizational meeting next January. That is it, Mr. Gandito.
Hey, I've got one question on that. Just going through it, I really don't want to get into a mission statement discussion because that's like going down a rabbit hole. But the one thing when I think about, I read all that and went through it, and then I went through the deliverables on it, and I call it stakeholder satisfaction, customer service, whatever you want to call it. I really don't know how we measure that, you guys, and to me, that's a big one. Whether it's to the counties, whether it's to the permit holders, whether it's to whoever the heck it is, how do we measure customer satisfaction of coming back through? Because, and I don't mean because you're not going to make everybody happy. The thing is, we try to do a bunch of different things like controlling the lake level at the Sacandaga. And it's kind of a give and take thing. And if somebody just looks at it one way and they don't understand the full story of how you got here and everything, then I think we lose some stuff. And I think we have a tendency maybe to forget some of that as people change and move around, and different people move into the area and the whole works. So that was the only thing I saw on that when I went through it and read it and said, hey, it looks like just we're missing something in that area. And then I'll shut up.
Right. That is a fair question. The quip always is, if we have an equal.
If you can hear us, Counselor, your audio has cut out. And we're just, hopefully Gina Bowman is on her way into the conference room to alert you to that. And in the meantime, if folks can hear me, Mr. Reagan, I'll just note that we had in a board meeting last year talked about the need to better sample customer feedback, customer satisfaction through customer surveys. We've just done the first of those in conjunction with our quarterly newsletter, and that was around the new online permit system. and how, whether people had used it, if they had used it, how easy was it to use, how likely were they to use it again. So that's our sort of our first foray rather into the customer satisfaction survey world. But the first one we've done, first of many, and hopefully we can build on that and get some feedback from the board on how to best expand that to include other areas. But is that at least a partial answer to your question, Mr. Reagan?
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah, John, I think it's just recognizing that to me, I think just where we stand, and I think any business today, that's such a big part of it is making sure that we get the feedback, we react to the feedback, but we also educate.
Terrific. Yeah, and again, the service that we utilized in conjunction with Constant Contact, which is how we publish our newsletter, and we work very closely with Gina Bowman to do that, only had, without expanding the service, the ability to do with the existing Constant Contact product we use, only had the ability to do a single survey question. So what we hope and what we see going forward is maybe around different topics, quarter to quarter, a certain topic and several questions that then we can track year over year, because my experience with these customer satisfaction surveys, and it might be yours as well, Mr. Reagan, is that you really need to track the same question to accurately see whether you're trending in the right way or the wrong way from year to year.
Yeah, John, I totally agree with you. You got to track, you start at baseline, and then you say, okay, is this a gap? So I totally agree with you. But I think the one thing, back to the actual county legislators of the various counties, I think that might be an important reach out to make sure that we're fulfilling what they need, and any suggestions or any inputs. You've done that with going out and having meetings and stuff and inviting them to it, which I think is huge. But I think also giving them a chance to put on paper where they stand, I think can be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. And as the CFO, Mr. Manicha, will attest, we sort of have a built-in customer satisfaction survey every fall when we send out our assessment invoices to the counties, and they unsolicited, reach out to us and tell us how they feel, sometimes in very succinct terms. But obviously,
John, that may not be the right time to get feedback.
Understood. But certainly, some of the measures that are before us, and certainly when I get to my monthly report, can expound on a little more in the context of the New York State budget, will improve some of those county level customer satisfaction numbers just a little bit.
Well, John, that's when you send out the survey. That day.
There we go. We'll establish a baseline which is positive, and then go from there.
Hey, John, we're back.
Okay. Yeah, we were just Counselor, we were just talking a little more about customer satisfaction surveys and the newsletter, and this is a great moment, I think, for you to conclude if you've done that, and turn it over to back to you, I guess, Mr. Candido, for the next item.
Okay, thank you for the discussion and the answers, the information. So we need a motion to accept the resolution on the mission statement and performance measurement review. Motion, please.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. DeWitt.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Very good. Mr. Leslie, once again, we have a resolution before us to advance to the board the approval of a third amendment to the ground lease and water usage agreement at Stillwater. Would you please explain.
Sure. That resolution appears on page 43 of your board packet. Basically, the ground lease and water usage agreement at Stillwater from 1985 made it to 2006. There was an amendment, a second amendment in October of 2021, pushing us out to March 31st of 2022. We're trying to get an appraisal done as the original 1985 agreement requires us to purchase the plant at the end of the term. This second amendment would extend the ground, actually this third amendment would extend the ground lease and water usage agreement out to June 30th. It would also authorize the executive director to negotiate an amendment to the definition of appraised value such that we would not be compelled to hire a third appraiser if the two appraisals, ours and the one created by Stillwater Associates vendor, are somewhat close. If we can negotiate to an acceptable figure, we need not hire a third appraiser. Obviously, if we can't, we would then still do so. But basically, you're extending the agreement to June 30th and allowing us to tweak the language as to how we'll arrive at a final figure.
Any questions on that? If not, we need a motion to accept.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
I'll second.
Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Mr. Leslie, you want to continue on to the board resolution to authorize a contract extension with Walden Environmental Engineering?
Sure. So in this case, this is, let's see, on page 45 of your board packet, this turns to Conklinville, a much larger facility and a much more difficult appraisal. We contracted with Walden Environmental Engineering via Resolution 2040-11 in November of 2020, authorizing Walden to prepare a valuation of the regulating district's 56 feet of head created by Conklinville Dam. It has taken Walden more time than I believe the Office of the State Comptroller anticipated it would take them. Our contract has expired, and we are looking to extend that contract term by 1 year. Walden, at this point, has delivered to us a draft appraisal document. We're still finalizing that appraisal, and certainly we'll be able to get it done within the year. We need to extend the contract because we have not yet paid them, and without a contract in place, we would not be able to pay them. So basically, it's just extending that agreement 1 year to December 31st of 22, so we can wrap it up and be done.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Entertain a motion to accept this resolution.
I make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
A second.
I'll second.
Mr. DeWitt?
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I believe we've had a long and lengthy agenda, and I believe that brings us to the end. So if there are no further business to come before the governance committee, I'll accept the motion to adjourn the governance committee meeting.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Hayes, Mr. DeWitt.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. So ordered. This committee meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Candido. I now call on Mr. DeWitt for the Finance Committee meeting.
Okay, I call to order the Finance Committee meeting and the roll call, Mr. Leslie.
Committee member Albert Hayes,
Here.
board member Nicole Allen. Here. Executive Director John Callahan,
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie here, Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha,
Here.
Chief Fiscal Officer, or Chief Engineer Robert Fultan, Compliance Officer Stephanie Rizicki,
Here.
Committee Chair Kenneth DeWitt,
Here.
Committee Member Timothy Reagan,
Here.
Board Chair Mark Finkel,
Here.
Board Member Alfred Candido,
Here.
and Board Member Richard Byrd has been excused.
Can I have a motion to adopt or revise the meeting agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Reagan,
I will second that.
Mr. Hayes.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. I'd like a motion to approval of the January 11th, 2022 Financial Committee meeting minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes,
Second? Second?
I don't know who's first and who's second. We heard Mr. Reagan's voice and Mr. Hayes' voice simultaneously.
Okay. Any discussion?
okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Can I have a motion to advance to the full board and recommend adoption of a resolution approving budget and financial plan required pursuant to Section 2801 of the Public Authorities Law? Mr. Minicha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the projected multi-year financial plan on pages 50 and 51 of your packet. You may recall from prior years that this multi-year financial plan, including its format, is required by the law of all New York State public authorities. So let me just walk you through kind of the general construction of it and the contents where it says last year, actual 2021, that represents financial data taken from the regulating district's audited financial statements. Current year estimated 2022 represents the first year the perennial financial plan adopted by the board last June, adjusted for our year-to-date results for the first 8 months of the current fiscal year. Proposed 2023 and 2024 represent the second and third year of the triennial financial plan adopted by the board last June. Proposed 2025 and 2026 represent projections arrived at by applying inflationary increases to the 2024 figures and adding what we believe are reasonable estimates for capital outlay and financed by the proceeds from the issuance of debt. If you sum the excess deficiency, the last figure on the bottom of page 51, if you sum the excess or deficiency of revenues and capital contributions over expenditures for the years 2022 through 2026, you will see that we arrive at a largely balanced financial plan over the course of those 5 years. Let me reemphasize that these figures represent our best projections at this time. Almost certainly, each figure in this financial plan will change as we move over time from projection to actual. Let me also clarify that the figures in front of you represent what we call a current law projection. You know from our last meeting that there are items proposed by the governor in the state fiscal year 2022-2023 executive budget that will, if adopted, positively affect the regulating district's financial condition. As none of those items have yet been adopted, none of those items are included in this projection. And I will happily stop here and also happily answer any questions you may have about anything you see here before you in this projected financial plan.
Okay, so no one has any comment. I'd like to have a motion to advance to the full board and recommend adoption of a resolution approving budget and financial plan required pursuant to section 2801 of the Public Authority Law. Can I have a motion?
I will make that motion.
Second?
I'll second
Mr.
it.
Hayes? Mr. Reagan?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Can I have a motion to adjourn the Financial Committee meeting?
I'll make that motion. I'll second it.
Mr. Hayes and Mr. Reagan?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Mr. Chairman, I hand you the gavel.
Thank you very much, Ken. Or Mr. DeWitt, excuse me. I'd like to call the March meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District to order. And again, welcome our new board member, Nicole Allen. She was probably a little bit swamped right now, but it all becomes clear. Roll call, Mr. Leslie.
Board members, Albert Hayes,
Here.
Nicole Allen. Here. Executive Director John Callahan,
Here.
Robert Leslie, Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Medicia,
Here.
Robert Fulton.
Here.
Stephanie Rizicki. Here. Board Chairman Mark Finkel.
Here.
Second Vice Chair Kenneth DeWitt.
Here.
Board members Alfred Candido
Here.
and Timothy Reagan.
Here.
Board member Richard Byrd is excused.
Thank you. I need a motion to adopt the meeting agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Hayes,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I don't, since I am not at the location, I don't know if anybody has signed up for public comment, but is there anyone is there any public comment?
Mr. Chairman, nobody here physically at the Sacandaga Field Office. I'll just ask our board administrator, Gina Bowman, to type up if anybody has signed up to the chat function.
No one has signed up.
Okay, then we will move on to the approval of the January 11th, 2022 regular board meeting minutes. I need a motion to accept or well, first of all, excuse me, any additions or corrections? If not, a motion to accept?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Reagan.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? In that case, we will move to the report of our executive director, Mr. Callahan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members have had an opportunity to review my report, which appears on page 56. I'll just highlight a couple of items briefly. Just as noted, we have moved into a new phase of our COVID-19 related restrictions. We did take our masks off on February 11th, saw each other for the first time in many, many months. The response was immediately a request to have a number of us put our masks back on, but here we are, new in the new COVID era. So we're very happy to be certainly moving forward into a not there quite yet post-COVID world. I want to pause and thank the staff for what has been just a universally positive and very diligent response over the last couple of years, dealing with some curveballs that were not insignificant. Just also want to note during this reporting period, our continued work with our executive chamber and division of budget colleagues. Obviously, Mr. Minicha alluded to it in his report, poised to receive, we hope at the end of this state budget process, some very, very good news financially for the regulating district, and certainly a lot of back and forth relative to that, and certainly taking some questions from other stakeholders, including but not limited to some of those county governments that Mr. Reagan referenced. I just also want to note our role in supporting training on the frozen surface of Great Sacandaga Lake by the 109th Airlift Wing, which provides such critical service to our expedition in Antarctica and elsewhere, February 15th through 17th. They were very appreciative of being able to deploy out of our facility here at the Sacandaga field office for that training. And shortly after that, numerous law enforcement agencies were based here to provide support for the walleye tournament on Great Sacandaga Lake, February 18th through 20th. That was instrumental in their response to several emergencies, none of which thankfully proved fatal. And I think the availability of this facility certainly aided in some of those responses. Just want to also note, as we have gone forward with our second year of the online access permit renewal system, virtually everybody here has provided a high level of support to make that successful. We just went over another milestone with 2,500 of our permits renewed online. That's about 300 permits more than the total online renewals last year. So certainly we attracted a lot of new users to that system. And as I reported earlier, that was the subject of our customer satisfaction poll in this season's newsletter as well. So certainly getting some good response there. And then before pausing for any questions, just on a point of personal privilege, also like to add my deep appreciation for my relationship with Mr. Rosenthal in these last 3 years, including having me over to speak to the Woodland Beach Association folks and working with him on initiatives like new waterproof charts to the Sacandaga Lake Advisory Council, which we hope to continue and move forward, and so many other things that his perspective as a permit holder and his background dealing with other issues on and around Great Sacandaga Lake, so useful. So we appreciate, I just want to say how much I appreciated working with Mr. Rosenthal as well. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll just pause for any questions any of the members may have. Any questions here? Albert?
No, I have none. Everything looks good.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone? Thank you very much for the report. We move on to contracts and actions. The first one is a resolution authorizing personal advancements, including the establishment of administrative officer and HRR operation manager positions. Again, Mr. Callahan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I've had the opportunity and privilege to speak with many of, if not all of the board members about this item, the supporting memo for which appears on page 64. So I don't want to belabor it, but just note in conjunction with, not replacing, an important effort that we're going forward with the board and the working group. There were some items that we felt were ready to move forward now that do provide both some advancement opportunities for existing employees and help us more equitably distribute the work that in a way that makes us more accountable and more efficient. So with that, I'll just note this resolution would establish the administrative officer and administrative officer 2 positions in the Hudson River area office and Black River office, respectively. The operations manager here at SFO, fill the assistant foreman position here internally at SFO, and make the corresponding backfills with the senior administrative assistant positions at the Hudson River area office, SFO here in Mayfield, and the Black River area office in Watertown. Since I have spoken with the board members individually, I'll just pause for any discussion or questions that the members have. Otherwise, we'd ask for the support on these employee transactions.
Is there any further discussion on this from the board members? If not, go ahead. Did I miss something?
No.
Okay, if not, a motion authorizing these positions.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
I would gladly second that.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Staff and committee reports. Mr. Candido, the report of the governance committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The governance committee has met and has several resolutions approved by the committee to bring to the full board for their action. The first would be the annual review and approval of the regulating district's investment policy. Their review has been conducted according to section 2925 subs 1 and 7 of the Public Authority Law, and it has moved into the board for its adoption.
We have a motion for the full board to accept the investment policy.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
Mr. DeWitt?
we did hear most of the discussion on this. If there's no further comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried.
Who seconded that?
Is it Mr. Hayes?
Mark, who seconded that?
No.
All I heard was the second.
Is that you, Ken?
No, I made the resolution, I think. I thought,
Yeah, Ken moved it.
I'll second that then. I thought somebody had seconded.
Mr. Hayes, thank you.
Okay, next.
The next resolution that was adopted by the governance committee to move to the full board for approval is under section 2879 sub 1 and 8 of the Public Authority Law, requiring that every public benefit corporation adopt annual review procurement guidelines. And this was approved by the committee with an amendment to the current procurement policy. So if anyone like further explanation, Mr. Manisha can explain that, or it can go right to motion.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Second,
Mr.
I'll
Hayes,
second.
Mr. Reagan?
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Mr. Candido?
Continuing, the next resolution that was adopted for approval to send to the full board for adoption is the annual review of the regulating district's disposition of property guidelines pursuant to section 2896 sub 1 of the Public Authorities Law.
Any further discussion? If not, motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Hayes?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, annual review of the authority mission statement and performance measures. Mr. Candido.
That was adopted it was approved by resolution to send to the full board for its adoption as it was presented by Mr. Leslie.
Any further discussion? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. DeWitt?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Candido, next.
The next resolution that is in front of the board for adoption was approved by the committee, and it is the third amendment to the ground lease and water usage agreement at Stillwater.
Is there any further discussion? If not, motion to adapt?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mr. DeWitt?
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Hayes?
Any opposed? Motion carried. And finally, the final resolution in front of the board for adoption passed by the governance committee is to amend an extension with the Walden Environmental Engineering at the Conklingville Dam. Is there any further discussion? If not, a motion to adopt?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Hayes?
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Finance Committee report. Mr. DeWitt.
This resolution was adopted by the Finance Committee, and I need a resolution approving the budget and financial plan required pursuant to section 2801 of the Public Authorities Law.
Do we have a motion to accept? Excuse me.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion or questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Next report is the General Counsel, Mr. Leslie.
My report is on page 81. I'll try and keep it brief due to the length of our meeting. Continue to work with Stillwater Associates. Continue to work with Erie Boulevard, valuing and coming up with new reservoir operating agreements based on those valuations. We did hear from a group, a railroad operator, interested in using land at under our jurisdiction up at Stillwater to set up a communications tower. I'm still waiting to hear from other agencies what their thoughts are on that. We've had a couple of FOIA requests during the reporting period to which there were no appeals. Free to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Leslie? Thank you very much, sir. Compliance Officer, Ms. Rozicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report can be found on page 2. During the reporting period, I performed both the quarterly and monthly audits of the access permit database and the daily review of the online payments. In all instances, I was able to reconcile all transactions Accurate documentation is being maintained and appropriate procedures are in place. I continue to manage the weekly COVID vaccination and testing program for all employees. All MWBE and SDVOB data and reports have been submitted. And finally, please review the contract status sheets found on pages 83 and 84. They're included in the board packet and satisfy the public authority law requirement. Do you have any questions? If not, that completes my report.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Minutia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the CFO report on page 85 of your packet. The regulating district's cash position remains strong, as it is roughly 3% higher than it was at the same time last year. It would be even stronger if we had collected the $564,000 assessment from Rensselaer County. I expect to have that check in my hand on this Friday. Year-to-date spending on our leased seasonal items is approximately $35,000 or 0.7% above last year levels. Most significantly, within the last couple of months, the regulating district made real property tax payments to municipalities in the amount of $1.16 million, bringing the total real property tax payments for the fiscal year to more than $3.1 million. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the regulating district's finances.
Any questions for Mr. Minutia? Not, thank you very much for your report. Finally, Chief Engineer, Mr. Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report begins on page 129. In the Hudson River area, in February through the 22nd of the month, we saw between 120 and 200% of historic average precip on watershed. Last snow survey last week, we had between 50 and 70% of historic average water content in the snowpack. And the inflow to the Great Sacandaga Lake and Indian Lake Reservoir was 94 and 183% of historic average, respectively. From the Black River area, we had precipitation for the month through the 21st of February, ranging from 130 to 150% of historic average, with water content in the snow of about 75% historic average, and inflow to Stillwater Reservoir of about 130% historic average. Page 7 and 8 and 9 contain graphs of the annual elevation. It's fair to say that we have started our refilling and our spring refilling, despite it being a little bit early, and in all of the reservoirs, and still remain confident that we're well positioned to store the flood inflows that may come along over the next few months. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Fulton? If not, thank you very much. Next is board member questions and comments. Anything from any of the board members? I again would like to welcome Nicole to the board. And if I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you'd like to say a few words and introduce yourself, I welcome giving you the opportunity.
Great. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here working with you all. My day job, I've over 20 years experience doing land use planning and community development. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development for LaBerge Group. Do a lot of land use regulations and also work with community financing plans, grants, loans, and some government operations throughout New York State. My husband teaches in Mayfield, so I'm kind of right between both locations, and hopefully be able to join you at either of these offices in the future.
Very good, and welcome. Welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Any other board member comments or questions? If not, I need a resolution for our next board meeting, which is April 12th. And right now it's at a place to be determined. Can I have a motion to that effect?
I make that motion.
Second?
Mr. Hayes?
I'll second it. I'll second it.
Favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. I need a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Sure, that one came right
Great,
away.
Candy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll see everybody April 12th. Thanks everybody for their work and support. We had a lot of agenda here with the committee reports and we got through it. Thanks everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.